Welcome to our Wild West story. Where are you watching from? State in comment and please subscribe. Let's dive in. Isabella Marlowe clutched the velvet of her travel cloak as the locomotive whistled across the barren plains. Behind her lay the marble ballrooms of Boston and the perfumed halls of her family's estate. Ahead, nothing but sand, mountains, and a frontier town that had a reputation for chewing up men and spitting out their bones, Deadwood Crossing. Her late uncle's letter had summoned her here, his scrawled words promising an inheritance of unimaginable worth, a gold mine. But his final line had chilled her blood, "Beware the McGraw Company. They will never let you keep what is yours." As the train screeched into the dusty station, she was met not with the courtesies of Eastern society, but with the hostile stares of rough miners, drifters, and gunslingers leaning against posts. The air was thick with smoke, whiskey, and suspicion. Then she saw him, broad-shouldered, his shirt stained with red dust, eyes like steel under the brim of a weather-worn hat. He tipped it in her direction before turning away, as if to warn her that she didn't belong here. But in that single glance, Isabella felt something dangerous stir. She stepped off the train, determined not to let the frontier break her. The mine awaited. So did the feud. And somewhere in the shadows of Deadwood Crossing, men were already plotting her downfall. The crack of the rifle tore through the din of the saloon-filled street. Horses reared, women screamed, and Isabella ducked as the bullet ripped through the air, splintering the wood of the carriage door inches from her face. Before she could scream, the same rugged man she'd seen earlier lunged forward, dragging her to the ground. Dust clouded around them as he shielded her with his body. The scent of leather and sweat filled her senses, and his voice growled low in her ear. "Keep your head down, lady. You've just been marked." The townsfolk scattered, but none lifted a hand to help. In Deadwood Crossing, survival meant minding your own business. The gunman vanished into the rooftops, leaving only whispers behind. Isabella's rescuer helped her to her feet, brushing the dust from her cloak. "Name's Colt Avery," he said, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "Your uncle mentioned you might be comin'. Guess he was right 'bout trouble finding you quick." That night, Isabella found herself inside a dim saloon with Colt at her side. The piano's broken tune fought against drunken laughter, the air sticky with whiskey. Every eye lingered on her too long. Colt leaned close, his tone like gravel. "Your uncle's mine is worth killing for. And the McGraw boys, they don't miss twice." The scarred outlaw leaned in, his breath stinking of whiskey and tobacco. His hand rested dangerously close to the revolver strapped at his side. "McGraw Company don't take kindly to strangers pokin' round where they don't belong," he hissed, his voice dripping with menace. Isabella felt her heart hammering, but she lifted her chin, refusing to let this brute see her fear. Colt's hand slid smoothly toward his own gun, his jaw tightening like coiled steel. The saloon went silent, every patron sensing blood about to spill. The outlaw sneered, tapping the brim of his hat. "Turn around, Eastern lady. Sell us that mine now, and maybe you live long enough to get back on a train." The words hit Isabella like a strike of cold wind. She had barely set foot in Deadwood Crossing, and already men were ready to kill her for what was rightfully hers. But before she could answer, Colt's revolver cleared leather with a flash of silver, the barrel steady as stone. "She ain't sellin'," Colt growled, his voice low, deadly. A tense standoff stretched across the saloon. The outlaw's hand twitched, and every man in the room reached instinctively toward his belt. Then, with a dark laugh, the scarred man tipped his hat, his eyes promising violence yet to come. "This town will bury you, lady. And you, Avery, you'll die beside her." With that, he vanished into the crowd. The piano struck up again, but the air stayed heavy, thick with danger. Isabella's hands trembled under the table. Colt leaned closer, whispering, "This is just the beginning. If you're stayin', you'd best be ready to fight." The flames roared into the darkness, licking the stars with hungry tongues. Isabella's scream was swallowed by the chaos as men rushed to form a bucket line, their shadows stretching against the inferno. Colt grabbed her wrist, pulling her through the panicked street. The smell of smoke and burning timber stung her throat, but it wasn't just a fire, it was a declaration of war. By the time they reached the mine office, it was too late. The wooden beams collapsed in a shower of sparks, and the safe inside, holding deeds, records, and proof of her inheritance, was reduced to twisted metal. Isabella's knees buckled. "Everything gone," she gasped. Colt steadied her, his face hard. That was their plan. No proof, no claim. McGraws own the law in this town. Without that deed, you're nothing but a trespasser. Through the haze, Isabella spotted a figure on horseback watching the blaze. The scarred outlaw sat there like a shadow carved from flame, his smirk illuminated in the firelight. Their eyes met before he spurred his horse and disappeared into the desert night. Rage boiled in Isabella's chest, hotter than the fire consuming her future. "They won't take this from me," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. Colt studied her, surprised by the steel in her tone. As dawn broke over the smoldering ruins, Isabella stood among the ashes, her eastern silks now stained with soot and dust. Colt placed a hand on her shoulder. "If you're serious about holding on to that mine, you'll need more than grit. You'll need allies. And a gun." Isabella swallowed hard, staring at the ruined office. For the first time in her life, she realized survival might demand blood. The telegram shook in Isabella's hand, her uncle's scrawled words dancing in the early morning light. "Trust no one but Avery." She turned to Colt, her breath unsteady. He read the note, and his jaw hardened. "Your uncle knew they were coming. He must have hidden something. Question is, where?" But before they could search for answers, the street erupted in gunfire. A group of riders thundered into town, dust kicking up like a storm. McGraw men, 6 of them, faces hidden behind bandanas, rifles glinting in the sun. They fired wildly into the air, sending townsfolk scrambling for cover. One bullet tore through a whiskey barrel beside Isabella, showering her in stinging splinters. Colt shoved her behind a trough, his revolver already blazing. The sharp cracks of gunfire echoed through the street, a deadly song of survival. The battle was chaos. Colt dropped one rider with a shot clean between the eyes, but another dismounted, charging Isabella with a knife. Her scream froze in her throat, until instinct surged. She grabbed a fallen pistol from the dirt, her hands trembling as she raised it. The shot rang out, deafening, and the outlaw crumpled at her feet. For a long moment she stared at the smoking gun in her hands, horrified at what she'd done. But Colt's voice cut through the shock. "You saved your life. Don't ever forget that." The McGraw men retreated, leaving bodies and blood in the dust. Deadwood Crossing stood silent, broken. Isabella stood taller, her dress torn, her hands still trembling but steadier than before. She had crossed a threshold there was no return from. The sheriff stepped into the street, his badge catching the morning sun like a brand of authority. Sheriff Dalton was a tall, hawk-nosed man with eyes as cold as creek stones, and Isabella could feel the weight of the entire town watching. His deputies closed in, their rifles leveled. "Drop the weapon, miss," Dalton barked. Isabella's hand shook as she released the pistol, letting it clatter to the dust. Colt moved to protest, but a deputy slammed a rifle butt into his chest, forcing him back. "She shot a man in broad daylight," Dalton continued, his tone flat. "In Deadwood Crossing, the law don't care if it was self-defense." The crowd murmured uneasily. Everyone knew Dalton's pockets were lined with McGraw gold, but no one dared speak it aloud. Iron cuffs closed around Isabella's wrists, the cold bite of metal more suffocating than the flames that had destroyed her uncle's office. She locked eyes with Colt as she was dragged away, her voice hoarse but resolute. "Find out what my uncle meant. Don't let them bury the truth." The jail was a stone box reeking of sweat, mildew, and despair. From her cell, Isabella could hear laughter drifting from the saloon across the street, the town already forgetting her plight. Hours later, the scarred McGraw man appeared at the bars, grinning like a wolf. "Eastern lady behind bars. Never thought I'd see the day. Tomorrow, the judge'll finish what we started." He tapped the bars and left her trembling, fury burning in her chest. The stone floor shifted beneath Isabella's boots as a hand emerged from the shadows, pulling up a trapdoor. Colt's rugged face appeared, covered in soot and sweat. "Quiet now, miss. We ain't got long before Dalton's men check in." Relief surged through her, but so did fear. Escape meant breaking the law, sealing her as an outlaw in the eyes of Deadwood Crossing. She hesitated only a moment before grasping Colt's hand. He pulled her through the narrow passage, their bodies pressed against the damp earth walls. The tunnel led beneath the sheriff's office and out into the dry creek bed beyond town. The night was alive with crickets and the distant howl of coyotes, but freedom had never sounded so sharp. Colt handed her a revolver. "You'll need it. They'll hunt us come dawn." They rode hard into the desert, moonlight glinting off the barrel of Colt's rifle. The air was cool, but danger burned hot on their trail. Finally, they stopped at a rocky outcrop, the stars glittering overhead like scattered diamonds. Colt built a small fire, his face flickering with light and shadow. "Your uncle trusted me," he admitted, staring into the flames. "Said if anything happened, I was to protect you. But there's more. He believed there's something hidden in those mines. Something worth killin' for." Isabella's breath caught. The gold alone was enough to drive men mad. What else could lie beneath? Before she could ask, a gunshot shattered the night. The fire sparked, Colt dove low, and Isabella's heart seized with terror. The rider's shot whined past Isabella's ear, splintering the rock behind her. Colt rolled to his rifle, returning fire with sharp precision. The crack of gunshots echoed across the canyon walls. The rider circled, his horse kicking up dust, his silhouette flashing in and out of the moonlight like a phantom. Colt shouted over the chaos. "Run for the horses, Isabella. Now!" She scrambled across the rocky ground, every breath a prayer, every footstep hounded by bullets. She mounted clumsily, fumbling with the reins as her heart pounded. Colt leapt onto his own horse, and together they spurred forward into the dark wilderness, the outlaw hot on their trail. The chase was relentless. Through dry riverbeds, over cactus-strewn ridges, the sound of hooves thundered. Isabella clung desperately, her skirts tearing, her lungs burning. She could hear the outlaws' mocking laughter cutting through the night. Colt twisted in his saddle, firing again and again, until finally a cry of pain split the air. The rider toppled from his horse, rolling into the dust. They slowed, both gasping, hearts still racing with fear. "That was just one," Colt muttered grimly. "McGraw's got a dozen more waitin'. We can't keep runnin'. We need to strike first." Isabella nodded, trembling but resolute. The East had taught her grace, the West was teaching her steel. As dawn bled across the desert sky, the two riders reached a high plateau overlooking the valley. In the distance, Isabella could see the yawning mouth of her uncle's mine, abandoned, yet waiting, like a beast guarding secrets untold. The first rays of dawn painted the desert in hues of gold and blood as Isabella and Colt dismounted, their eyes fixed on the distant flicker within the abandoned mine. The wind whistled through the canyon like a warning, carrying with it the faint clang of shovels striking stone. Someone was digging where no one should be. Colt crouched low, his hand brushing the revolver at his side. "McGraw's men," he muttered. "But why dig here? This shaft's been empty for years." Isabella's pulse quickened, recalling her uncle's cryptic words, "The truth lies deeper than gold." Perhaps the mine hid more than veins of ore, perhaps it hid a secret worth dying for. They crept closer, pressing into the shadows. From behind a jagged boulder, Isabella peered inside. Torches lit the walls, casting grotesque shadows of men laboring with pickaxes. She recognized the scarred outlaw among them, his face twisted with determination. And there, half buried beneath rock, was something that made Isabella's breath catch, a heavy iron chest, its surface etched with strange markings. "Looks like we found what your uncle was protectin'," Colt whispered. But before they could act, a sentry turned, spotting them in the gloom. His shout echoed through the cavern, and rifles swung in their direction. Bullets sparked off stone as Colt dragged Isabella back into the canyon. The mine exploded into chaos, torches flaring, men shouting. They mounted their horses under fire, dust flying, hearts pounding as they fled into the hills. Behind them, the scarred outlaw's voice thundered like a curse. "Run, Marlowe! You'll never escape what's buried here." The ground bucked like a living beast, knocking Isabella nearly from her horse. Colt grabbed her reins, steadying her as a deep roar rolled through the canyon. Dust plumed into the sky behind them, mingling with the cries of McGraw's men as the mine entrance collapsed in a thunder of stone. The scarred outlaw barely leapt free, his curses lost in the rumble. When the tremors finally subsided, silence fell, an eerie, suffocating silence. Isabella clutched Colt's arm, eyes wide with terror. What was that? Colt shook his head, sweat glistening on his brow. Not natural. Not just gold down there. Something else. He spit into the dust, his face grim. Your uncle wasn't just rich, he was keepin' a secret. They rode until the mine was a speck behind them, finally stopping at an abandoned ranch house leaning against the horizon. Inside, dust lay thick over broken furniture, the scent of old wood and desert air hanging heavy. Isabella sank into a chair, her body trembling with exhaustion. Colt lit a lantern, his voice quiet. "We'll lay low here. Then we figure out what your uncle wanted us to find." But Isabella couldn't rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the iron chest buried in the mine, its strange markings glowing in torchlight. Her uncle had died for it. The McGraws were killing for it. And she was now entangled in its shadow. The night deepened, coyotes howling in the distance. Just as Isabella's eyelids drooped, a thud echoed from the barn outside. Colt froze, rifle in hand, his expression sharp. Another thud. Then the crunch of boots on gravel. The riders stormed from the barn like wolves on the hunt, rifles raised. Colt shoved Isabella behind the crumbling wall of the ranch house, shouting, "Stay down!" The night exploded with gunfire, bullets slamming into wood and stone, splinters stinging Isabella's face. She clutched the revolver Colt had given her, her knuckles white with fear. Colt moved with deadly precision, returning fire from the shadows. One outlaw fell, his scream torn away by the desert wind. But the others pressed closer, their boots pounding against the hard earth. "Hand her over, Avery," one bellowed. "McGraw wants her alive." Isabella's heart hammered. Alive. For what? The thought chilled her more than death. A shadow loomed at the broken window, a rifle barrel sliding through. Without thinking, Isabella raised her revolver and fired. The outlaw crumpled, his weapon clattering to the floor. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but Colt's approving nod steeled her resolve. The last rider lit a torch, hurling it onto the ranch roof. Flames licked hungrily across the dry wood, casting everything in orange glow. Smoke filled Isabella's lungs as Colt pulled her toward the back door. The building groaned, beams ready to give way. Colt shot the final outlaw in the chest, but as the man fell, his hand yanked a dynamite fuse from his belt. The spark hissed to life, rolling dangerously close. Colt's eyes widened. "Run!" he roared. They bolted into the desert night as the ranch house erupted in a fiery explosion behind them, wood and flame raining from the sky. The scarred outlaw sat tall in his saddle, the firelight dancing over the jagged line that ran down his face. His smirk was calm, almost mocking, as Isabella and Colt stood breathless in the ashes of the ruined ranch. "You run well," he called, his voice smooth as a rattlesnake's hiss. "But you can't outrun fate." Colt raised his rifle, but the outlaw lifted a hand. "If I wanted you dead, Avery, you'd be in the dirt already. I came to talk." Isabella's pulse thudded painfully. The outlaw dismounted, his boots crunching in the smoldering dust. "Name's Mason Creed," he said, tipping his hat with false politeness. "McGraw pays me, sure, but I ain't blind. Whatever's buried in that mine is bigger than gold, and I want a piece of it." Colt's jaw tightened. "We don't deal with snakes." But Isabella's curiosity pricked. Creed's words dripped with truth. He wasn't loyal to McGraw, only to greed. And greed could be turned. Creed leaned close to her, his scar pulling into a twisted smile. "Think on it, Miss Marlowe. With me, you might live long enough to see what your uncle died for." He swung back onto his horse, vanishing into the smoke as swiftly as he appeared. Isabella stood trembling, Colt's hand gripping her arm. "Don't trust him," he growled. But in her heart, Isabella knew Mason Creed's offer was a poison seed, and one day soon, it would sprout. The posters hung like curses on every wall and post, Isabella's face crudely sketched beneath bold black letters. "Wanted, Isabella Marlowe, $5,000 dead or alive." The sum was enough to make every drifter, gunslinger, and outlaw in the territory eager to track her down. Colt tore one from the saloon door, his eyes dark. "McGraw just painted a target on your back." Inside the saloon, whispers buzzed like hornets. Men glanced at her, their eyes hungry with greed. Isabella tugged her cloak tighter, but it was useless. Her eastern beauty stood out like silver against dust. Colt guided her to the bar, his hand never straying far from his gun. "We'll need supplies," he muttered, "and fast horses." But even as he spoke, two bounty hunters stepped forward, their spurs jangling like death knells. "That her?" one sneered, tilting his hat toward Isabella. Colt's revolver cleared leather in an instant, the saloon exploding into chaos. Chairs shattered, whiskey spilled, and bullets screamed through the smoky air. Isabella dove behind the bar as Colt traded fire with the hunters, each shot echoing like thunder. When the smoke cleared, both hunters lay sprawled in the sawdust, blood staining the floorboards. But silence quickly gave way to more whispers. Deadwood Crossing would not forget. Isabella staggered to her feet, shaken but alive. Colt gripped her shoulder. "This town won't protect you. We ride tonight." They rode under the veil of night, the desert stretching endless beneath the stars. The weight of the bounty pressed on Isabella's shoulders, but so too did something else. The closeness of Colt Avery, the steady presence that had saved her time and again. The East had taught her to value wealth and status, but here on the frontier, survival was measured in trust, and in Colt's arms, she had found it. They stopped by a creek, the moon shimmering over ripples of water. Colt watered the horses while Isabella knelt on the bank, the cool stream washing dust from her face. For the first time in days, silence wrapped around them. She looked up to find Colt watching her, his rugged face softened in the moonlight. "You're changin'," he said quietly. "Boston lady wouldn't have pulled the trigger back at that ranch." Isabella swallowed, her heart thundering. "Boston lady died with my uncle," she whispered. The words hung heavy, raw, and real. Colt reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing against silk-soft skin. For a heartbeat, the war, the mine, and the McGraws vanished. All that remained was the spark between them, fragile yet unyielding. Isabella leaned closer, her breath catching. But before their lips could meet, the crack of a twig shattered the moment. Colt spun, revolver drawn. From the tree-lean, shadows emerged, 5 bounty hunters, rifles glinting. "End of the road, Avery," one sneered. The creek exploded into violence. Bullets whined through the night, sparking against stone. Colt returned fire, ducking low, his revolver roaring. Isabella scrambled for cover, her heart slamming in her chest. A hunter rushed her, knife flashing in the moonlight, but desperation lit her veins. She swung a rock with all her strength, striking him down before he could strike her. Colt fought like a man possessed, every shot precise, every movement sharp. 2 hunters fell, their bodies crashing into the creek. But there were too many. Isabella grabbed the fallen knife, crouching beside Colt as gunfire chewed the earth around them. "We can't hold them," she cried. Colt's jaw clenched. "Then we don't." He grabbed her hand, dragging her into the water. They plunged into the icy creek, letting the current carry them downstream as bullets splashed around them. The hunters cursed, their shots fading as the darkness swallowed the fleeing pair. They emerged far downstream, soaked and shivering but alive. Isabella collapsed onto the bank, gasping for breath. Colt sat beside her, his chest heaving. Their eyes met, the adrenaline burning hot between them. Without words, Isabella leaned into him, her lips brushing his, the kiss fierce, desperate, and filled with everything the frontier had stolen from them. But even in that fragile moment of love, Colt pulled back, his face shadowed with worry. McGraw won't stop, Isabella. Creed won't stop. And the truth buried in that mine. It's waitin' for us. The horse snorted, steam curling from its nostrils in the cold night air. Isabella crawled forward, her trembling fingers brushing across the saddlebags. Inside were raw gold nuggets, stamped with her uncle's seal, the very proof the McGraws had tried to burn from existence. She looked at Colt, eyes wide. This proves the mine is ours. Colt frowned, running a hand across the saddle. Maybe. But why leave it behind? His words were cut short by the sudden crack of a rifle. The horse reared, a bullet slicing the air where Isabella knelt. From the shadows, a voice echoed cold and mocking, Mason Creed. He stepped into the firelight, revolver drawn, his scar twisting in the glow. That horse was meant to find you, he said with a grin. Bait. McGraw knows you won't quit, till you see what's buried in that mine. And now, you're walkin' straight into his hands. Colt's revolver gleamed, but Creed only laughed. I ain't here to kill you, Avery. I'm here to make you an offer. Help me take McGraw down. Together, we split what's under that rock. Or. His gun shifted toward Isabella, his grin sharp as a knife. I take her, and you get to bury her eastern bones in western dust. The standoff stretched like a noose in silence. Colt's revolver hovered steady, his blue-gray eyes locked on Creed's scarred face. I don't make deals with snakes, Colt growled. Creed chuckled low. Snakes survive, Avery. You and your lady won't. Before steel could thunder, Isabella stepped forward. Enough. Her voice rang sharp as gunfire. McGraw's the real enemy. You both want him gone. If my uncle's secret lies beneath that mine, then neither of you can claim it alone. But together. She let the words hang in the cold air, baiting Creed's greed. Creed studied her, his scar twitching as if fighting a smile. Finally, he lowered his gun. Smart lady. Smarter than I thought. He holstered his weapon, eyes still glinting like a rattler ready to strike. Fine. We work together, until McGraw's buried. After that, it's every soul for themselves. Colt bristled, but Isabella's gaze held firm. She whispered when Creed walked ahead. We'll use him, Colt. Then we end this. Colt's eyes softened on her, pride and fear mingling. You've got more grit than half the men I've ridden with. That night, their uneasy alliance rode toward the mine, torches burning like stars against the black desert. Isabella clutched the saddlebags of gold, her uncle's ghost whispering through every clink. The truth was near. The valley blazed with firelight as McGraw's men stepped from the shadows, rifles gleaming. At their center rode Bartholomew McGraw himself, a hulking man with a beard black as coal and eyes like pits of tar. His voice thundered across the canyon. You've cost me men, money, and time, Miss Marlowe. Tonight, it ends. Creed swore under his breath. Colt tightened his grip on his rifle, and Isabella felt her heart hammer like a war drum. The mine yawned behind McGraw's line, its dark mouth waiting like the throat of a beast. Gunfire shattered the silence. The canyon erupted into chaos. Colt and Creed fought back to back, steel flashing, smoke thickening the air. Isabella ducked behind a boulder, clutching her revolver, firing at shadows when they closed too near. Every shot, every scream, every flash of flame dragged her deeper into the brutal truth of the frontier. Then, with a bellow, McGraw charged forward, a massive shotgun in his hands. He fired, the blast tearing stone inches from Isabella's face. You'll die here, girl, he roared. Colt dove between them, his revolver blazing, forcing McGraw back into the firelight. Creed's laughter echoed through the smoke as he fought like a devil unleashed. But even victory seemed hollow. The mine behind them rumbled again, a low growl rising from the earth itself. The battlefield froze as the earth split, spilling the shattered iron chest from the rock. Its lid buckled, revealing not only gold but strange, black stones etched with markings that shimmered faintly under torchlight. The glow painted the canyon in eerie light. Men gasped, crossing themselves, whispering of curses. McGraw's eyes went wide with greed. He lunged, shoving aside his own men to claw at the chest. "Mine!" he roared. But as his hands touched the stones, a shockwave of dust and force ripped outward, knocking men to their knees. Isabella shielded her face, her uncle's warning flashing in her mind. "The truth lies deeper than gold." Colt pulled her close. "It ain't just gold, Isabella. This is something else. Something he died to keep hidden." Creed's scar twisted as he grinned. "Power. Enough to buy this whole damn territory." The canyon dissolved into madness. Men clawing, fighting, dying over the chest. Colt dragged Isabella back, shouting over the chaos. "We have to end this now, before it destroys us all." But McGraw loomed from the dust, clutching one of the stones, his eyes wild, his shotgun ready. "You'll never leave this valley alive," he bellowed. The world narrowed to silence as Colt and McGraw faced each other, revolver against shotgun, dust swirling like ghosts between them. Isabella's heart stopped, knowing only one would rise when the smoke cleared. McGraw roared, his shotgun rising, but Colt was faster. His revolver cracked, once, twice. The shots echoed like thunder rolling across the desert. McGraw staggered, disbelief etched in his eyes, before collapsing into the dirt, the black stone rolling from his lifeless hand. The mine groaned behind him, swallowing fire and dust as if sealing its cursed secret forever. The surviving gunmen fled, their courage dying with their master. Creed stood at the chest, greed warring with survival in his scarred face. He reached for the glowing stones, but Isabella leveled her revolver. "Leave it," she said, her voice steady as steel. For a long, tense moment, Creed stared at her, then chuckled. "You've got iron in you, lady. More than most." With a mocking tip of his hat, he turned and rode into the desert, vanishing like smoke. As dawn broke, Isabella and Colt stood alone amid the ruins. She clutched the gold nuggets, enough to claim her inheritance, but meaningless compared to the man at her side. Colt's hand brushed hers, rough yet gentle. "What now, Isabella?" She looked east, where the life she had once known awaited in marble halls. Then west, where dust, danger, and love burned hotter than any ballroom flame. Her choice rang clear in her heart. She tightened her grip on Colt's hand. "Now," she whispered, "we build something worth livin' for, out here." The sun rose over Deadwood Crossing, painting the desert in fire and gold. A new day for Isabella Marlowe. A new day for love, forged in dust and blood. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts. See you in the next story.